Storm Survival is the title of our meditation on our scriptures for this 10th Sunday after Pentecost. Every child needs to be hugged and then let go. When we were children, a hug from loving adults in our lives gave us security that we could take with us to go and explore the world. Hugs let us know we were valuable. And the release from the hug told us we were viable, that we had within us the capability to grow and to move out into the world and function in purposeful ways. Ours is a family that believes in showing affection and giving lots of hugs. Even so, years ago, our youngest daughter, Bethany, was anxious about going away to summer church camp. And Camp Wapo on Lake Wapagasset had a 3-day, 3-night stay tailored just for 8-year-olds like her. And during the hour-and-a-half drive from Minnesota into Wisconsin, she whined and complained the whole way. And Saturday morning, when we returned to pick her up, she was laughing and playing with her cabin mates. And wouldn't you know, she didn't want to leave. From then on, church camp became the high point of every summer for her. It was my hope as a parent that I could love my daughters so that they would always know that they were valuable. I never wanted my daughters to doubt that they were loved. But sometimes, like all children, they doubted their own viability, their own sense of capability. Bethany's trip to summer church camp became a discovery that she was capable, viable. She began to realize that she had the ability to explore the world. Our scriptures today tell 2 stories of trust and fear. Both remind us that God values us and creates ways for us to become viable, capable of acting in ways that bring wholeness and healing to our world. It never ceases to amaze us that our sacred and our holy scriptures hold such honest stories of brokenness and family dysfunction. And in these stories, we see the fears that we hold within ourselves, along with the failures we experience in our own families. We find hope in these tales of terror, rivalry, anger, and betrayal, because in these, we also hear about God's power to intervene, to overcome the worst within ourselves, to save, and to lead us into blessing. The story of Jacob's family continues this week as we hear about Joseph. And unfortunately, a toxic generational pattern of parental favoritism continues. And this preference shown by Jacob for his son Joseph stirred up fear in his other sons. And their fear was based on their anxiety that they weren't loved enough or as much as Joseph. And distance is created. Separation between the father and the sons is the result. This story reminds us of the distance created between us and our God as a result of our sin. And so much of our sin is grounded in fear. Our fear. We become jealous when we're afraid of the loss of love. Our greed grows when we're afraid of losing security. We cheat because we're afraid of failure. We lie out of fear of punishment. We argue and we even demonize one another when we fear we won't be respected or our opinions won't be understood. And the list goes on. Who will save us from the effects of our fears? Well, at the age of 17, Joseph is young and brash, with years yet to learn the skills of tact and diplomacy. And God has sent him dreams, which he was foolish enough to share with his family, dreams of his brother's sheaves of wheat bowing down to his, dreams of the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowing before him. So when the opportunity presents itself, the brothers conspire to take his life. Reuben, the responsible eldest, talks them out of it. Joseph finds himself alone in a pit of fear. How terrible is it to live with fear from one's life at the hands of one's own family, from those who should be the ones we can count on for protection and security. The brothers decide to sell Joseph off as a slave, pocket the money, and stain his coat with blood in a story of subterfuge. Our reading ends ominously, and they took Joseph to Egypt. And the rest of the story is a miracle of evil redeemed. Joseph rises from slave to CEO. God provides opportunities for Joseph to exercise skills in management and leadership that take him to places of responsibility for the lives of others, even assuring his own family's survival during a severe famine. In the midst of this particular storm in Joseph's life, God was constantly present to preserve his life, to bless his gifts and his talents. And we take inspiration from the ways that God gave Joseph reassurance of his value and his viability. Our gospel story of the disciples struggling on the sea tells us how Jesus both valued his followers and wanted to see them become more viable. He wants them and us to realize our capabilities as we trust in God's care. Last week, we heard how Jesus challenged the disciples to use their resources blessed by God for the benefit of others. And together, they had the experience of passing out loaf after loaf to feed more than 5,000. The miracle of Jesus rescuing us from deep hunger is followed by this story of Jesus rescuing us from deep fear. After Jesus sends the disciples off in their boat so that he can have time alone to pray, a sudden storm whips up dangerously high waves on the lake. Storms come up quickly on the Sea of Galilee even today, just like the crises that crop up for all of us on the unpredictable seas of our living. Knowing this, Jesus comes to them in their time of need, simply and directly. And this show of divine power is so outside of the disciples' experience that they assume they're seeing a ghost, until Jesus speaks to them in a way that identifies with God's own name. Take heart, I am. Don't be afraid. The Hebrew people experienced the sea as the location of all evils, particularly a stormy sea. Just as Jesus comes to the disciples he loves with saving power, so he comes for us in the storms of life. Jesus, the Son of God, is the one who is able to walk on the waves, the one who is able to make a pathway on the surface of evil. When the winds blow and our boat is swamped, he is the one in whom we can trust. Well, excitable Peter wants to test his capability, and we can identify with Peter. He's the disciple who's enthusiastic but ambivalent. He's courageous and cowardly. He's faithful and self-centered. Peter is like us at our worst and our best, as we try to be disciples of Jesus. He's also the one disciple in the boat who shows he's beginning to understand what faithful discipleship is all about. Peter is beginning to get it. He sees that with God's power in our lives, we can begin to do what God does. We can be the ones who step out in faith to go beyond the limitations we place on ourselves, and especially beyond the limitations others place on us as well. Today, we learn from the story of Joseph, who was pulled by God's grace out of the pit of fear to wait with trusting faith in the God of infinite resources. We learn from Peter, when we're overwhelmed by fear in life's storms, that we can call out and find ourselves already in the grip of God's powerful hand. We have a message of comfort to bring to others. That in the storms of life, we have a God who walks on the waters, a God who comes to be with us wherever we are. In today's world, we, as the church, are like a boat launched into the waters. It's pleasant and comfortable to be the church when the waves of the world are calm. When storms come as illness or tragedy, tough economic times or poverty, pandemic, or the exposure of systemic racism, then it's harder to be the church as we're being tossed about. And it's just in these times that we, like Peter, can begin to understand that we are able to confront the storm. Like Joseph, we can cope, even in the face of fear. We can take great and glorious risks of faith because God has valued us by becoming one of us in Jesus, his Son. And now God sends us out to be viable, capable. Together this week, may we climb out of our boats, serve joyfully, creatively, and courageously in the world, giving thanks and glory to the God who comes to be with us. Amen.